At this time, the evangelical world was all abuzz because the National Association of Evangelicals was about to get off the ground. And Rian is utterly connected. Because again, he's the president of the board of Westminster, and he wants the students to come in, and so he's angling for the OPC to enter that. And so he has this idea, knowing how deliberate the OPC is, particularly in the mindset of those who had been through the trials of Machen, in which it had just been railroaded through, and the previous question had been moved over and over. So he knew the OPC, it was not going to be something he could just probably do on the floor. So he puts forth this motion that the OPC would have a committee of 9 that would work. This committee would study the relationship of the witness of the OPC to the broader world, to think about the communication that it uses, to think about the evangelistic method it uses, with the goal of not only he wants the OPC to expand, but he's also angling for us to get in the NAE. He wants us to join. So he actually has that motion pass in 1941 at the General Assembly. But here's the amazing thing too. He gets almost every single person he wants on it. The people that are fully supportive of his agenda, he packs that committee with.
It was pre-worked out.
Yeah. So it's like if you show up there, the assembly was at Westminster Seminary. And so if you show up there and Rian has this idea and, no one's really speaking against it, and then he not only nominates, but he has other guys nominated, he gets the committee packed. So he gets 5 guys that he absolutely wants on it. Himself, Gordon Clark, Robert Strong, Clifford Smith, and Burton Goddard were all totally in his court. But he couldn't get all 9. And it's the 2 that he couldn't get that ended up being the thorn in his flesh. And that was Cornelius Van Til got in this committee, and also Murray Forst Thompson, who had written so powerfully against what had happened when the OPC had formed. So these were 2 men that, to use a term that came 70 years later, this is like the definition of Machen's warrior children, with Murray Forst Thompson and Cornelius Van Til on this committee of 9.
So were there 2 other figures that were more mediating figures? There weren't necessarily Rian's top picks, but they also didn't prove to be in the minority.
Yeah, there was a ruling elder from Orange, New Jersey, Freitag, and the other one was R.B. Kuiper, who was got on the committee. But I think Kuiper. So what's fascinating with Kuiper is that
did he ask to leave at some point? Maybe I'm imagining that, because he did not vote in the minority eventually.
No, I don't think so. So it's fascinating that we know a lot about the Committee of 9, or one of the most enlightening reports is by Ed Harriman, and son-in-law, the son-in-law of R.B. Kuiper, who at the time there was the Calvin Forum was a 4 times a year paper out of Grand Rapids that talked about things within the Christian Reformed Church. They also, in every single issue of the Calvin Forum, had what they called the OPC correspondent or the Eastern correspondent. And the reason why they sometimes named it the Eastern correspondent, because they wanted to include news about Westminster Seminary. And so for the decade of the 40s, the correspondent to the Calvin Forum is Ed Harriman. And Ed Harriman loved his father-in-law so much that he eventually wrote the great biography of R.B. Kuiper.
R.B. Prophet in the Land.
Prophet in the Land. So it's fascinating in that I don't think it's a stretch historically to say when you're reading Herema, that is what R.B. Kuyper is thinking, or he's given it the approval or the sign-off. And so in 1941, at the report of the Committee on Nine in the Calvin Forum, Herema gives this kind of like, yeah, we're going to see how this is. This is something we're going to think about, we're going to do. And so that's how it reads in 1941. But in 1942, wow, do you get a different report on the Committee of Nine in the Calvin Forum. And you see how much in a 12-month span, particularly after the meetings for the Committee of Nine started, and Fantil and Thompson found out what the true agenda was, that the whole thing shifted.